This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Jam-packed show that we have as we are now nearing NBA All-Star Weekend. The festivities, the atmosphere, it's all up in the air. Get your hotline bling ready. We're ready to talk basketball. To do that, you know I got to roll with my PNC, my brother from another mother, my man Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, host of www.shawsports.net and the Big Kahuna. What's going on, Mr. Shaw?
I'm chilling, man. You know, getting ready for All-Star Weekend, as you alluded to, but we got some business to take care of here on The Baseline. Salute to all the fans and listeners who tune into our show on a week-to-week basis. We love you and we appreciate you. Hope you're going to enjoy this week's show, man.
Yeah, man, we've got a great show lined up in a little bit. We have our man. He is the editor for Welcome to Loud City, SB Nation's blog site that covers the Oklahoma City Thunder. JA Sherman will be joining us to talk about this Oklahoma City Thunder team that is rolling. Definitely a great game the other night against the Golden State Warriors and probably a possible Western Conference Finals matchup. So we'll have him on in a few. We also got our man. He is the true guru who knows all things. I wish we had like one of those little Swami hats to give him, man. He gives us such great insight regarding fantasy basketball, our segment of the Fantasy Flow. Mark Kaplan will be joining us. And then also in the drop, we will talk about the state of affairs in Sacramento, recent reports about George Karl possibly being removed as the head coach. Shaw and I will weigh in on that. And of course, our coveted Coast to Coast, where we cover all the news in the association. Great show lined up. And of course, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in. Got your headphones plugged in, listening to the Baseline NBA podcast. You know how to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or you can get at me at Gayface Lee. But we always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA_the Baseline. Hashtag up the baseline. Let us know who you are and what you're about. Available on all the major platforms, available on Microsoft TuneIn, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Player FM. So we always encourage you to download any one of those platforms, and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things NBA. Big shout out to our peoples at Rabble TV, Baseline Live, blowing up. Had an excellent show just the other week, man, and we will continue to move forward as we go through the NBA season. So be sure to check us out on there at Rabble TV, and to be sure to check out Baseline Live. You know how we do, and you know how we like to set it off. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
I
down.
put you down, put the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. This week we have an excellent and really great guest. He is the editor of Loud City, and he's here to help us talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. And it's interesting that we've waited this long to talk about a Thunder team, which people were kind of on the fence about whether or not this should be the team to beat, or even the team that can be able to contend with a team like the San Antonio Spurs or possibly the Golden State Warriors. And it looks like over the last couple of months, they have definitely stepped up their game and have been pretty much put in that conversation. So we have our man, JA Sherman. Mr. Sherman, thank you for joining us this week so we can talk about this Oklahoma City Thunder team, which is absolutely hell on wheels every single night that they touch on the basketball court.
Hey guys, thank you. It's great to be here and talk about the Thunder and the process that they're in with so many things and so many moving pieces. It's always interesting to see, and talk about their perspective and how other people perceive them.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really interesting about this Thunder team is really the dynamic between Billy Donovan, clearly with so much happening in the background with the status of Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. I think what's been amiss is the poise and the leadership qualities that Billy Donovan presents on an NBA level, because people didn't think it could translate for what he was doing at the University of Florida. Can you talk a little bit about how his coaching, his mindset, the way that he strategizes, how this has helped this Thunder team, to the record that they have in? It's not just about the talent that they have on the floor, but I would like to think that Billy Donovan is also a direct reflection of this team's success recently.
I think that's a great observation, and perhaps the greatest testament that we can give to Donovan's success this season is the fact that we really don't talk about him as a college coach anymore. And that's pretty remarkable because he was a very, very good one, a very successful one at the University of Florida. And so, rightly so, a lot of people, including myself, questioned whether or not he had the ability to translate from the college game and, on approximately a 35 to 40 game season at best to the 82 regular season game grind of the NBA, plus the playoffs, plus dealing with all the egos involved in the NBA. And so the fact that now we're just talking about his coaching ability and not whether or not he can make the transition, I think is a great testament to Donovan's success so far. And it's been hit or miss at times. We do know that he has struggled in some areas. He's still getting a handle on the lineup, on how to manage minutes and things like that. But in other ways, you can see how his coaching acumen has fit in very well with the overarching Oklahoma City Thunder personality and the type of people that they like to have associated with their organization.
You talk about the rotations, and that's something that I definitely wanted to get into because I think a lot of people are concerned about really who is going to really step up, outside of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, which obviously we're going to talk about them and their situations as well. But is it something that he needs to do? Is there a button that Donovan needs to push to get an Ibaka, Kanter, or Waiters, whoever, to be very consistent, on both sides of the basketball, really, but I guess mainly from an offensive side where KD and Russ don't feel like they need to go one-on-one taking turns?
I think that's a great question, and sort of the unanswerable question for every single team in the NBA is not just which players play best, but which players play at their best with other players. And so sometimes it's not about the player specifically, but who they can play alongside that brings out the best in them. And we do know, for example, that Russell Westbrook has had great success and excellent chemistry with his two big men, Steven Adams and Enes Kanter. And so anytime Kanter's on the court, he exudes a lot of confidence because he knows Westbrook will set him up for those pick and roll situations and allow him to finish and do the things that he does well. So it's about how do you get those two on the court without hurting the rest of the team, because Kanter has struggled on defense. And so we know that if the Thunder are going to be contending, they have to make sure that they minimize his defensive liabilities and maximize his offensive liabilities. But the biggest question, the biggest issue that the Thunder are going to face is something that they have constantly run into over the past few years, and that is how do you manage the minutes of Durant and Westbrook so that when the playoffs arrive, they are well rested, they're ready to go, they're not worn down, kind of like Durant was back in 2014, his MVP season, so that when they get into those deep rounds of the playoffs, they are ready and they're mentally accurate, they're mentally ready to go, and they can deal with the stress of the situation. That's the biggest question, is how do you minimize their minutes and then still stretch out their influence so that the overall team is a reflection of their excellence.
Editor for Welcome to Loud City, JA Sherman, joining us here on the Baseline. Be sure to check out the website, www.welcometoloudcity.com. Sherman, the other night we saw the Oklahoma City Thunder take on, clearly the best team in the NBA right now, which is the Golden State Warriors. And one of the things that I wondered about is the state of play for Dion Waiters. I just feel like, this guy, he got a lot of hype after being drafted. Clearly he's been scrutinized when he played with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And we thought, last year after the trade that he was going to come into his own and maybe even find a place for what he can do and help basketball teams with his ability to play that two-guard position. I just feel like there's still that level of inconsistency. And I would think that playing next to guys like Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant would kind of give him that hunger to be a better basketball player. In your mindset, do you think that that's what you're seeing from Dion Waiters, or is he going to be like that missing piece, like kind of like that J.R. Smith to the Cleveland Cavaliers? I feel like it's just trading faces, because what Dion Waiters could bring to this Oklahoma City Thunder team that like what we saw the other night against the Warriors clearly could be the missing piece, a definitive piece to help continue to complete this depth that this Oklahoma City Thunder team truly has.
I think that's an outstanding question for this season and for what the Thunder decide to do with Dion long term. And I agree that a guy like J.R. Smith is a good analogy. Another player that I think of is Jamal Crawford in Los Angeles with the Clippers. How those guys had to go to a couple different teams to finally figure out what their niche was. And I hope Dion's niche is with the Thunder, because I do think he has legitimate talent and a skill that is valuable. The problem that has plagued Dion since he's come into the league is inconsistency in the environment that he has played in. He's a unique kind of player in that it seems like he does need to have a certain support system in place within his team. We saw that even going back as far as Syracuse during his 2 years there. Cleveland was a mess when he was in Cleveland, and then LeBron came in. They thought he was going to provide a stabilizing influence. Didn't happen. And so, we were hoping that Waiters would find that stability in Oklahoma City. And I think from an emotional and mental standpoint, I think he's getting there. But what we need to see is that translate into consistent production on the court. And we were starting to see it. And then, unfortunately, the Thunder lost Andre Robertson to an injury. So Dion went from trying to run the second unit to being the starting two guard. And so that's kind of messed with his game a little bit. I think he's trying really hard. And I think he's trying to be that kind of guy. We just need to see it over a longer course of the season, more than just a couple weeks at a time. But we hope that he gets there, because he does seem like he's a good teammate. And I think his teammates want him to succeed. With the Warriors' loss accepted, I don't think they utilized him as much as they could have to take the load off of Durant and Westbrook in that game in particular.
Well, Waiters is definitely in there now, again, for Robertson, who's out. And I think you look at Serge Ibaka, who's been, a defensive player of the year and always usually up in those standings per se. But look across the OKC's lineup. Their offense is top 10 pretty much in every single category. And they're basically middle of the pack. They're not terrible defensively, but where do you see them needing to take the biggest step? With guys like with Robertson being out and Ibaka, I kind of think he's been on a little bit of a decline in the last couple of seasons. Where do you see this team need to picking up the slack defensively?
I think part of it stems from the fact that Donovan did bring in a new defensive mindset over the offseason. In previous seasons, the Thunder relied on their athleticism, their amazing athleticism that few teams can really challenge around the league, where they would be able to close out on shooters and protect the paint at the same time. Well, Donovan wanted a little bit more of a conservative approach, different approach dealing with other teams' pick and roll situations and their flex offense and things like that. And so I still think they're getting used to how to play a different kind of defense. And so we're still seeing some growing pains there. A big part of it, though, is defensive effort and defensive focus. And the Thunder are historically a little soft in the first half of each season over the past 3 or 4 years. So I am hoping that this Warriors game, where we finally saw some defensive focus come into play, that will translate into future games. Because at the end of that first half, when we saw the Warriors shoot about 60%, put up 73 points without really even trying that hard, I think we were all prepared for the Thunder to have another defensive meltdown. But they turned things around in that second half, and they figured things out. They grounded out, and they put themselves in a position to win. Unfortunately, they did not pull out the win, but the things that we saw on the defensive end were encouraging.
SB Nation, welcome to Loud City. Editor JA Sherman joining us here, catching them on Twitter at WTLC. Sherman, we just touched on Serge Ibaka, and it's interesting because I don't like to nitpick. I've always been a fan of Serge Ibaka. I've had an opportunity during previous All-Star appearances to have an opportunity to touch base with him, talk to him a little bit and stuff like that. And I just feel like, we had talked about the big three. And at that time, the big three, when the Thunder made it to the NBA Finals, it was about Harden, it was about Westbrook, it was about Durant. Harden's gone. The big three now, everyone wanted it to be Ibaka, Westbrook, and Durant. And I feel like Ibaka is just so far removed from that big three. Like, we don't ever talk about how important Ibaka really needs to be for this team, maybe because it's been more about what he brings defensively than what he does offensively. But I'm still trying to figure out where Ibaka fits in this whole equation, because I would believe that he really should be the anchor for that front court to alleviate the pressure that Durant has to have, being the offensive juggernaut that he is. Let Durant, let his game cater to what needs to happen. But I think now it just really becomes a part of who is Serge Ibaka in this grand scheme of things under this Donovan system, because I just, there are times we don't even mention Ibaka's name through most games. But the Thunder as a team holistically is so powerful that maybe that's just exactly what it is. But I'm just wondering what you see when you see Ibaka out there on the floor. Is he like a lost cause, or can he be an iconic player that really helps this Thunder team have a magical season this year?
I think if I could play pop psychologist for a second, I think Ibaka might wonder the same thing at times. What exactly the Thunder need him to be as a player and as a teammate? Because I don't need to remind you guys, we're not that far removed from seasons where Ibaka was posting triple doubles, where he was getting points, rebounds, and blocks in games. And so we know that he has an elite level of ability in a couple different categories. But what we have to remember that's different from a player like Harden is that Ibaka is an elite role player. He is a role player in that he does a couple things at an elite level, but he doesn't have an all-around game that allows him to be able to kind of coordinate an offense or run an offensive set. He's mostly a read and react guy. He'll do exactly what you tell him to do. He follows the play calling well. He doesn't make a lot of poor choices, but he needs to know what's going on. He needs to understand what his decision-making process needs to be, because anytime you ask him to improvise or try to make snap decisions on the fly, that's not where his strengths lie, and it gets him in trouble. So I think it's really incumbent on Donovan to not waste Ibaka's amazing abilities, both on offense and defense, and not to lose him as a teammate, because he's so good at what he does. Donovan has to figure it out and not lose him over the course of this transition year, because he can change games from the defensive end. We've seen it happen. And we've also seen it happen where he can have these amazing games where he shoots 10 for 11 for 26 points and grabs 12 boards and completely changes the offense. So it's about figuring out exactly what he needs to be, because like you said, there are times when he just disappears. I don't know if you saw the box score from last night's game, but he played about 36 minutes. He had 8 points and 3 rebounds. And that was a big reason why the Thunder were not able to control the defensive glass the way they needed to put themselves in a better position to win that game. So it really comes down to Donovan. I think he's got to figure out how to use Ibaka more effectively.
Well, before we move on here, I just, you're talking about Ibaka and, talking about some of the supplemental pieces. I got a 2-part question for you. One, flat out, do you think the OKC Thunder are being disrespected as a potential title contender? And second part, as we move towards the trade deadline, with Ibaka's role kind of in question, even in his own mind, does OKC, or is there a move out there that they need to make to potentially bolster this roster? Because I look at this, it seems like they have everything. They just need to kind of figure it out from within. But what are your thoughts as a guy who covers the team on a regular basis?
Well, I am of the opinion that I prefer that a team figure things out with the pieces that they have, because I think the Thunder do have enough pieces in place to contend with the other big three teams, the Cavaliers, Warriors, Spurs. But it's about using those pieces more effectively. I think that this is. I can't even really count the first time they played the Spurs, because it was the first game of the season. Nobody knew anything from that standpoint. But I think as they play the Cavaliers and the Spurs and then the Warriors later this month, they're going to get a better sense of what they have and what they don't have. And I think a big piece of what will determine whether or not their bench is good enough is the continued progression of their outstanding rookie Cameron Payne, who has really renovated the bench that was anemic and completely impotent in the first half of the season, and had us all very, very worried. He has breathed a breath of fresh air into the bench, not only from his play, but from his attitude. It's infectious. It's exciting. He loves being a teammate with these guys. And I think he could almost single-handedly change the complexion of how the second unit plays. very much like a second-year player named James Harden did a couple years ago.
JA Sherman joining us here on Welcome to Loud City. Shaw, I know that you had another follow-up question with reference to a possible move regarding Serge Ibaka, but also I think you also had a perspective that you had with regards to the status of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, Sherman, you're a guy who's there, you're following, you're paying attention, you hear all the rumors, and, KD is very good at kind of locking some of these things down or trying to say, hey, this is just part of the process. But what does your gut feeling tell you? I mean, there's, obviously the KD to Washington thing. Now Wojo came out with a maybe KD to Golden State thing. There's the Stephen A report that KD will opt in for a year, and then he and Russell ride off together at some point and maybe go end up in LA. Where do you think is potentially going to happen with this? I mean, I know a lot depends on where they finish this year. If they win a championship, then that kind of cures all. But what does your gut feeling tell you about, Kevin Durant and then I guess future for Russell Westbrook?
Well, I think that if Durant has good counsel around him, the most logical thing to do is to sign the 2-year extension with the opt-out after the first year to put him then into the new NBA TV deal money, which is going to skyrocket the overarching salary cap. And that essentially gives him another year to be in the Billy Donovan system, to be alongside Russell Westbrook and Ibaka, who's both of their contracts are coming due at the same time. So that would make all three of them free agents at that point. So the most logical thing for Durant to do is to stay in Oklahoma City for another year. And I can't imagine a scenario that would cause him to change that perspective. Something would have to go really, really wrong for him to jump ship before that and disrupt what they're trying to accomplish. Now, what happens after that? Well, then I think that really you have to look at 2016 to 2017 to figure out where they are on the competitive landscape. I don't know what the likelihood of them legitimately contending for a championship is this year, because while they are getting there, they're not quite at the same level of the Spurs and the Warriors. They do have some steps to go. But if they're close and if they're figuring it out and putting things together, then I think Durant and Westbrook would absolutely continue their mission to try and bring a championship to Oklahoma City. That's my gut feel. I think the Wizards thing is really far-fetched. That's a team that looks like it's on the decline. They have not done a good job building around what they had from a year ago. The Warriors story from Wojnarowski, that was really about the Warriors' salary cap. That was less about Durant and more about what the Warriors can do to free up the cap space to get Durant. So, you just got to keep your eye on the ball and figure out, what is new and what is old news.
He is the man. He is definitely running an excellent site. SB Nation's Welcome to Loud City. If you want to know more about what the Oklahoma City Thunder is doing on a night in, night out basis. And I love some of the captions that you guys throw up on the site. And that also gets featured on the Twitter. It's our man, JA Sherman. Be sure to check out the site's Twitter at WTLC, and then also go to the website www.welcometoloudcity.com. Sherman, man, we appreciate you hopping on, and I doubt very seriously that this will be the only time that we will have you on here, because I really think that we're going to be talking a lot about the Oklahoma City Thunder as we start nearing ourselves towards the end of the regular season and venturing off into the playoffs. JA, man, we appreciate you hopping on with us this week.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Hope to talk to you again.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now to give you the Fantasy Flow. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, The Baseline NBA podcast. And as we embark ourselves well into the year of 2016, and with the current rise and the frenzy that has taken place with fantasy basketball, who none better than get one of our guru, our specialists, who's definitely on top of things happening with fantasy basketball. We got our man, Mark Kaplan. You can always catch him on Twitter at The True Guru, 2013 FSWA basketball and 2014 baseball champion. You can catch him in Fantasy Alarm. Mark, man, thanks for joining us this year. Happy New Year to you, man.
Happy New Year to y'all. Appreciate y'all having me on. Looking forward to talking some fantasy hoops.
Man, it's been a long time. Where's the time missed, man? I think the last time we were talking about it was probably before the season even began. And, you know, a lot of people who are fully vested in participating in fantasy basketball, whether it's your standardized leagues or your daily fantasy leagues, I don't think people kind of anticipated the growth that has taken place with some of the players who are now kind of showing face in this current season. Probably people that we didn't think were ready to kind of get on that stage and start producing the kind of numbers that they're producing. So first things first, Mark, what has surprised you so far for this 2015 2016 NBA season as it relates to the productivity that you're getting from most of your marquee players, like guys like Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant? Is it pretty much what we've expected, or have they really like kind of, opened up your eyelids and said, wow, man, these guys, man, are absolute phenoms? Which ones do you think is the actual phenom so far, like, fantasy MVP like?
I mean, when you look at the top guys, I feel like most of the top guys have reached value. I think one of the surprising things for me is Anthony Davis, whether it's the injuries, just he doesn't seem to be at the top level. For me, the biggest guy that's come out of nowhere is Karl Anthony Towns. For a rookie, for what he's doing, he's just taking this league by storm the last month or two of the season and just putting himself up there as one of the elite players, top probably 20, 25 guy right now, and just doing it from out of nowhere when before the draft, he's probably a 5th or 6th round pick. Now we're looking at this guy talking maybe a late 1st round pick next year. So for me, the elite guys, I feel like, the Westbrooks, the DeMarcus Cousins, Kevin Durant, they're kind of doing the same thing we thought they did. You don't really see much improvement. Of course, Steph Curry is easily the number one fantasy guy. I think he's taken a major step in securing that, not just because he's consistent, but just 50% from the field. He's making almost 5 3-pointers a game. Just all of his stats are just so mind-boggling. I think he's easily set himself up as the number one guy.
Well, I love that you started, that little segment there with Kat. And something that I think everybody, if you're following the NBA, you realize that the rookie class in general has been pretty surprising. So what are some of the other names out there? And I think even maybe look forward towards down the line here as we go to the stretch run rather. What other rookies do you think could actually maybe potentially get better as we close out these last 25, 30 games?
Yeah, man. I think you look at a guy like Porzingis. I think it's interesting with him. I feel like he's shown some improvement, and there's times when you're very excited for him, and then there's 3 or 4 games where he just doesn't show up. I feel like a lot of his values on Carmelo Anthony, and when Carmelo plays, Porzingis, besides blocks, just doesn't really seem to be in it. I'm kind of looking for Jahlil Okafor. I just feel like the Sixers are going to have to play this guy a lot. If Northern Noel, if they get shut down or doesn't play, whatever it is, I think Okafor is one of the key guys. I think he's going to have a lot of fantasy value. I think the Sixers want to see how good this guy actually is. He seems to be 100% over his injuries. So he's a guy I'm definitely targeting. And then you kind of look at what's going to happen with the Lakers, D'Angelo Russell, and that situation, because they keep bad-mouthing him. We don't know about the playing time. I think he's a guy that could step up if he gets 30, 35 minutes down the stretch run, especially the last month of the season, because I think the Lakers want to see how good this guy actually is if he plays 30, 35 minutes a game. So he's a guy that could definitely see his value increase.
Mark Kaplan joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast, our segment, The Fantasy Flow. Be sure to catch Mark at The True Guru. Mark, we talk about, obviously, the playmakers so far this year. And to me, who are your must keepers as far as, I'm sorry, not must keepers, but as far as when you look at the guys that might be available on the waiver wire, you had mentioned earlier before about injuries taking place. Who are guys that you really, if there's an opportunity for guys that just should be picked up, that you should really look into to get these guys and more likely keep them in your lineup rather than making them one of those guys that you kind of rotate in and out as an expendable piece. It's pretty much like a keeper just simply because of the trends that are happening with some of the injuries taking place.
Yeah, a couple just come to mind real fast. Michael Gilchrist, he's come back from injury recently. He's only played 3 or 4 games, but he's a really good source for rebounds. I like him. Another guy, a small forward, is Justice Winslow. I feel like we're talking about the rookies. He's starting to get 30 minutes of playing time. And while he's not going to score a lot of points, if you need some rebounds, he's the guy I think you got to start targeting. You're talking about guys in and out of the lineups, but we're approaching the trade deadline. I know we'll get to that. But when you look at a guy like Dennis Schroeder, where Jeff Teague, is has some injury problems, but B, they're talking about trading him. A guy like Schroeder, if he becomes a starting point guard in Atlanta, he's a guy that could just blow up and have elite type numbers down the stretch. And you can get him for basically free right now because no one's really, paying much attention to him.
I mean, I think that's a great segue into the next part of things. I mean, there's some other rookies too that I think playing time, Emmanuel Mudiay, because I think Jameer's been out, and Stanley Johnson as well too, because KCP's been out. Don't know how long that's going to last. But, when we talk about the trade deadline, there's a lot of names being moved or potentially being moved. What are some of the guys that you're really, really watching to see what situation they go to and how that opened up playing time for other guys on their current rosters?
Yeah, I think you definitely have to look at the Sun situation. I feel like between Markieff Morris and Tyson Chandler, I feel like one or both of those guys might be moved. And if they don't get moved, or I think Chandler almost automatically gets moved, he might not. I know he's saying he wants to stay there. They could open up some time for Alex Len. If Markieff Morris doesn't get traded, he's apparently going to be starting the power forward position. That's a very big, just very good value right there, especially because he was basically picked up off the waiver wire recently. I think I look at Brandon Jennings. I mean, they're talking about wanting to trade him. They're not really playing him. But if he goes to a situation where, hey, he's not going to be the starting point guard somewhere 25, 30 minutes a game, I think you can see Brandon Jennings really help people on assists, get some points. It's kind of hard with NBA trade deadline because the teams that are in it don't really have a lot of trade, good players to trade away, and the teams that aren't in it aren't really looking to get any really good players. So you basically have to find teams that are tanking, that are just going to continue to tank and trade away, their best player, and hopefully, maybe a TJ McConnell somehow starts for the Sixers or someone like that. So I think until we see some major blockbuster moves, it's not really going to impact fantasy as much as we think it is.
Mark Kaplan joining us. He rolls with the crew of Fantasy Alarm. You can always catch them on Sirius XM Fantasy weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. Mark, when I think about this fantasy season, I think about some of the underlying names, people that don't get a lot of rep or mention, but when you look at what they do statistically, they help propel certain teams that I don't think people were counting for. So a couple of players that come to mind for me, Gorgui Dieng. Next to the monstrous numbers that Karl Anthony Towns has been posting, Gorgui Dieng has been balling out recently since the injury to Pekovic out there in Minnesota. But I'm a little skeptical about the way Sam Mitchell utilizes his rotation and just does not give this guy enough credit. We've seen this a few years ago with Kevin Love before he started ascending to stardom, that, Gorgui Dieng is the kind of guy who's definitely solid on the points and rebounds tip. How confident are you that if you're someone that has a guy like Gorgui Dieng that you ride with him, or do you look to sell high given the kind of value he's been giving recently over the last couple of weeks?
I mean, if you can sell high on him, I think you do it. But the problem is, I don't think really people want to give him the respect. You're talking about it. I mean, when Kevin Garnett and Pekovic don't play, Gorgui Dieng is a very good option. He's getting rebounds. He's getting double-digit points. He's getting a couple blocks here and there. So he's not a guy I'm looking to trade because I don't think I'm going to get fair value for him. And I don't think KG is just going to magically start playing 5-6 games in a row. Even when he comes back from injury, they're still going to only play him 15 minutes. He's probably not going to play back-to-backs. So Gorgui Dieng is definitely a guy I really like. I think that's a great name to throw out there because he's not getting the respect he deserves, even though last week or two he's been putting up huge numbers. I think that continues because Pekovic we know can't stay healthy, and KG's at the end of his career, and with the Timberwolves, playing with their young core, I think they're going to see what they have in Dieng. And, Kevin Martin's not playing there either that much. I think Zach LaVine's going to slowly get more minutes. He's already getting about 30 minutes a game. So I think they're really looking at that young core and seeing what they have. So I'm not really trying to trade him away. I'm more keeping them and riding that great train.
So let's talk a little bit about, two opposite ends of the spectrum. Take a guy like Chandler Parsons and even maybe Monta Ellis a little bit. Two guys who started the season off really, really slow. Even Drew Holiday, throw him into that mix. All those guys now, they are over their injuries. I think Ellis just had his knee drained, and now he's playing a little bit better. Parsons had the minutes restriction removed. Holiday, same thing. Those guys have rewarded people for waiting. Or really, if someone dropped those guys foolishly, now those guys have a gem on their hands. But what are some players that you're looking at now that you should be getting ready to get rid of. Perhaps maybe that they're going to get shut down because of injuries, or like I said, it's just not, you just don't have the same confidence in them to finish out the season that strongly.
That's a great question. I think you got to look at Carmelo Anthony. We already know he's dealing with knee soreness, but it just seems like every single year this guy just doesn't finish the season strong. He's the guy I'm looking to dish away. Dwight Howard, kind of the same boat. I know. I think he's a lot better in points leagues, so we don't really have to worry about the free throw percentage. But we've seen Dwight get shut down. We've seen him miss games here and there. Of course, if anyone wants to take on Blake Griffin, then, if you can get anything right now for Blake Griffin, because it seems like he's going to be out for a long time. So those are a couple guys at the top tier that I'm looking to get rid of, because I just don't think that they play the entire season. It's tough. And a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge, I want to see what he's starting to play really well, but we also know the Spurs do kind of sit their players the last couple weeks of the season. So if I can get the LaMarcus Aldridge fair value for him, then I don't mind trading him at all either.
Mark Kaplan joining us here, Fantasy Alarm. Roll with the crew. Be sure to check them out weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. Go to www.fantasyalarm.com. Mark, a couple questions before we let you ride on out to the sunset, my brother. For me, one of the interesting things that we look at after the trade deadline is whether or not you gravitate to seeing who might get moved, where they get moved to, and the teams they might play for. Now, one person that I'm definitely eyeing is the status and the situation regarding Markieff Morris. Ever since the Suns let go of Jeff Hornacek, and Earl Watson has basically stepped up to the plate to say we must nurture Markieff. Basically, they're making him sound like he's that superstar player. He's come out and he's actually been putting up some pretty lofty numbers for people who may have either missed Markieff Morris, who have fortunately kept him on their fantasy roster. But when you look at what's going to happen between now and maybe the trade deadline and moving forward, what do you think the status and situation could be for Markieff Morris should he stay a Phoenix Suns? And how will that adversely affect the play of guys like Archie Goodwin and Devin Booker, who clearly are under the radar type guys? If given the shot opportunities, they've shown that they can produce numbers and can be the future backcourt for the Suns. And for that matter, what could that might mean for a guy like Brandon Knight, who obviously is still under contract with the Phoenix Suns as well, too?
Yeah, I think when you look at Markieff Morris' situation, I think a lot depends on whether he stays there or whether they trade him. I mean, we talk about showcasing a lot where a team's going to play a guy like Markieff Morris for 2 weeks. Hey, this guy still has it, up his trade value, and they trade him away to another team. So if he gets traded to another team, I don't see him starting. I see this guy coming off the bench, being a great role player, a real good basketball player, but I think he loses a lot of his fantasy value, or a lot of the fantasy value he just gained by becoming the starting power forward there. And I think it doesn't really affect Devin Booker. I think Booker's going to get his. They really like him there. Archie Goodwin, of course, that's all matters on Brandon Knight's health. But Goodwin, he gets some points. He gets a good amount of assists. I love Devin Booker no matter what. I feel like the Suns are going to roll with him at shooting guard for the rest of the season. No doubt about that. But when you look at Markieff...
So, Mark, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So would you consider the idea, if you're someone who owns a Markieff Morris, to possibly sell while the selling is good?
Yes, definitely. I think if someone's going to give you, someone's trying to, hey, I just see what Markieff Morris has done over the last week, I want him bad. And yes, I would trade him, because if he gets traded to another team, you're just going to be sitting there, hey, this guy could be waiver wire fodder in a couple weeks.
Right. So I want to get some quick hitters in here real quick. So I'm just going to ask you, throw out a couple of names. You're going to tell me, buy or sell. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
All right. Elfrid Payton.
Sell.
Tyreek Evans.
Definitely sell.
Ish Smith.
I'm buying for now. As long as he's healthy in Philadelphia, I think they're going to roll with him for a while.
Okay, Chris Middleton.
Definitely buy Chris Middleton, one of the best pure scorers in the league.
Okay, Miles Turner.
Buying him too. I feel like the Pacers are going to want to roll with him. And, I mean, once they insert him in the starting lineup, he's been great for them.
Wesley Matthews.
Sell. Can't do anything on a consistent
Sell
basis.
The Iron Man. Oh, that's tough, man. That's tough.
Okay, and last one here, going with your hometown, Marc Gasol.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to sell Marc Gasol right now. I mean, reports came out that he's playing on one leg. Maybe the All-Star break helps him get healthier, but he seems to have some great games at home and kind of struggles on the road. So if I can get top value for him, I don't mind trading him.
He is the man, Mark Kaplan. Be sure to check him out, www.fantasyalarm.com. He rolls with the boys. They're also on SiriusXM Fantasy. Mark, my brother, once again, we appreciate you hopping back on. We can't wait to bring you back on again soon.
I always appreciate talking fantasy basketball with you guys. Appreciate you having me on. You have a great day.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was the Fantasy Flow. Time now for the drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. This week, the big topic of conversation has been the rumblings over the last few days, or really over the course of the weekend. ESPN Mark Steins broke the story that there's been much talk about the possibilities of George Karl being recused as being the head coach for the Sacramento Kings. This off the recent string of losses, one more of an embarrassing loss, more so against the Brooklyn Nets, which I think has really kind of sparked up the conversation. And Shaw, when you look at this again, it just seems like the floodgates have been blown open here with carte blanche and taking out head coaches any point during the course of the season. And if the Kings choose to do this right now with the record that they currently have, being around 8 games under 500, they probably are still on the outside looking into possibly making the playoffs. It just rings a sense of uneasiness about how this Kings team from one moment looked like they got their act together, and then the next moment it's just absolute chaos.
Yeah, it's frustrating, brother. You hit it on the head again. 6 out of their 7 losses going into Super Bowl Sunday. And they just look like a team that's reeling. Rudy Gay been injured. DeMarcus Cousins, same thing, has been banged up. Rondo now has turf toe. And then we have the George Karl situation where, after that meeting, I think that was in November, where Rondo and Cousins sat Karl down and ended up having 2.5 hours, and things started to get a little bit better. They have regressed again. And that's really unfortunate because this team has a lot of talent. They were my sleeper pick to sneak into the playoffs. They had the 8th seed, just 2 weeks ago. Now, all of a sudden, with this recent stretch of losses, they are teetering. And you said 8 games under 500 as recording of this show. Don't know what's going to happen there. And if George Karl goes, I think that might be the best thing at this point, because that situation it's getting old. It's getting tiresome to kind of keep dealing with it. Has he lost a team? Does he not have the right voice in the locker room? And I know at some point they're going to start looking back at the players and looking at Cousins and some of the others. But I think at this point, it really is about George Karl.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm reading the story written by Mark Stein, and it's an interesting quote, from All-Star center DeMarcus Cousins. And again, credit to Mark Stein for, bringing the story to light and really what's being reflected upon. He goes on by saying, I'm not going to keep blaming these guys in the locker room. And he's talking with reference to the frustrations of this Kings' ability to play defense. He's saying energy and effort is a huge part of the game, but I'm not going to keep blaming on that. We got a bigger issue, and we need to figure it out as a team. And I find it interesting that of all the people that we talk about where a lot of this is head started, we say that DeMarcus Cousins is the best center in the NBA, or he's the best big man in the NBA. But right next to that same accolade that we give him is the fact that he does not play good defense. He is not as sound a defensive player that we lead ourselves to believe just simply because we put that connotation that he's the best big man in the game. We talk about how there's good and bad, and in some points, systems usually help, manifest a better gameplay from a defensive perspective for some guys to kind of hide and mask their deficiencies. DeMarcus Cousins, I don't know if it's an effort thing. I don't know if it's a discipline thing, but he's not as good a basketball player on the defensive end that we all like to be led to believe. And for me to hear him talk about this, it clearly means that he doesn't think that his coaches are putting him in the best position to allow him to improve on what he can bring to the table from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, the funny thing is, you mentioned that he's one of their leaders, quote unquote, and I use that term loosely, in defensive rating, and he puts up 1 point something blocks a game, 1.2 steals a game, but he's a gambler. He's also one of the guys who fouled the most in the league, and historically has been one of those guys. So that's where you see where he lacks the discipline defensively. Stats he gets defensively are a lot based on his gambling and sometimes his instincts. But I agree with you. That's the part on the game that he does need to get better at, and a part of that is from a coaching standpoint too. But there has been some shifting around, especially this season. He's played some 4, he's played some 5. You have to ask him where he's most comfortable, because he does have the range now where he can shoot a little bit too. But I think he's more of a natural center as opposed to the 4-man. But he does play out there with Willie Cauley-Stein for the last couple of games. But like you said, man, this is this is something that's organizational. It's not just about the team, the players, the rosters, or the coaching staff. It's it's upstairs with Vivek and Vlade and all of them. It's just they need to get this right because they have a lot of talent on this team. And they're going to set to lose some of these pieces. They're thinking about moving Rudy Gay. Rondo's already talking about his free agency and what he's going to want next year. It's a very volatile situation, and a lot of people thought and saw this coming. I'm just sad that it's coming to fruition.
You're tuned to the Baseline. Cali Warren Shaw, our segment of The Drop, talking about the Sacramento Kings state of chaos once again. I think every time we do that, we should have like part 1, part 2, part 3. We should just probably put the ellipsis there, just, when it comes to this team. And let's go ahead and dial it back and focus the attention again on George Karl. If George Karl is fired as the head coach, Shaw, what does this say about George Karl? I mean, I empathize and I have sympathy because, such a valiant effort on his part to battle from cancer to get to this particular stage. But again, he comes with so much baggage as a head coach. We talk about how DeMarcus Cousins is a gambler. George Karl is a gambler. He gambles on the fact that this team is better off just shooting the basketball and to heck with the defense. I mean, we've seen this during the heyday years, the Sacramento Kings. We've seen this with the Denver Nuggets when he just doesn't seem to have the emphasis on getting this team to play good team defense, or at least good enough team defense to be competitive on a playoff level perspective. I mean, now we're talking about a team from a talent perspective that really should be an above 500 team on paper. But yeah, it just doesn't connect, especially with George Karl being the head coach. So what are we saying about George Karl as a head coach? Is this his final dance as a head coach in the NBA?
I think so. And it's not a knock on Karl. He's obviously a Hall of Famer and has accolades upon accolades. And I have no problem with George Karl in terms of what he's accomplished and what he's meant to the NBA. But sometimes things pass you by a little bit, your ability to relate to certain players. The quote unquote millennials, as to use a Robert Sarver quote there. And it just might be that George Karl is going to be best suited now to be in the studio and be a consultant to some teams as opposed to being on the sidelines, traveling with the team on a day-to-day basis. And again, I'm not knocking George Karl. I just don't feel like the Sacramento Kings and this mix of players are for him. And that's unfortunate because it seems like he might have reached them for a little bit and there was some seems of understanding, but they've definitely regressed and taken a step back. And Carlos Williamson is, according to Stein, is a guy that the Sacramento Kings would be looking to potentially replace Karl with, promoting from within. It'd be interesting to see what would happen, though, with Nancy Lieberman, who's strictly there because of George Karl. So I don't know if Karl goes, if, that's quote unquote, that's her ride, where she's also going to be ousted as well, or she would just choose to step down out of loyalty. Definitely have to watch the situation here in the next coming days as Sacramento Kings seems to be reeling once again.
The Sacramento Kings on the next stretch of important basketball games, which really, might just culminate the status of whether or not this is going to be George Karl's, last stint as being a head coach. But more than anything else, man, this is a basketball team which I think when their heads are right, they're about as dangerous as any team that you could possibly think of right now in the Western Conference. They may not be on the level to compete with a team like the Golden State Warriors, but I do think that they can give teams like the San Antonio Spurs and maybe even a team that we just finished talking about, the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think they can give team fits from a matchup perspective. Shaw, if you were a gambling man, would you like to see a team like the Sacramento Kings in the Western Conference playoff picture?
Absolutely not. And maybe that's because, for lack of a better phrase, I have some affinity towards them. I just feel like they are talented and they can put it together and be scary at any given time. I wouldn't be lining up to play the Sacramento Kings. Some people would, because you think they're dysfunctional and maybe you can get into Boogie's head and Rondo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not lining up to play them. I would necessarily pick them in a playoff series against one of those top or elite teams, but it wouldn't be my first choice if I had a choice as one of the top teams in the Western Conference.
So if you were like a mid-seed team, you definitely wouldn't want to be fooling around with a team like the Kings, more so than maybe like the New Orleans Pelicans. Look, last year, the New Orleans Pelicans team clearly, looked and showed to be a much better basketball team than maybe we are giving credit for. But this year, obviously, has been much of a disappointment. Between those two teams, you would rather see Anthony Davis and that crew rather than seeing the Sacramento Kings.
At this point, I think so. I mean, AD is still very scary, and both teams don't play defense. So, you always feel like you would be able to get what you want offensively. But I just feel like, they really are attacking on all sides. And when Rudy Gay and Rondo and all those supplemental pieces have it together, I think they're just slightly more dangerous than the Pelicans, or at least this season. Last year, obviously, you wouldn't have said the same thing. But the Pelicans just don't instill fear into me, even though they have been playing a little bit better as of late.
All right. Well, we'll definitely keep our eye out for what's happening out in Sacramento. But once again, Mark Stein reporting that they are strongly considering removing head coach George Karl as they move forward. And it could probably be as soon as the NBA All-Star Weekend. Something like this might possibly occur. We will wait and see. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right. Out in Charlotte, it's about time. The big man, Big Zo, Alonzo Mourning, was finally honored by the Charlotte Hornets, albeit he only was there for 3 years, but still, man, it was 3 dominant years, especially playing next to the big man, Larry Johnson, Grandmama Shaw. How good does it feel to see one of our generational players finally being honored in a city that really he helped erect to become what the type of team that they have been over the last couple of decades, still being a viable NBA franchise to allow a guy like Michael Jordan to actually kind of move on in there and continue to keep showing up with that teal and blue type colors, bro.
Man, that's pretty cool. I mean, I enjoyed watching, the highlights of that. I didn't see it live, but Zo is definitely a guy who has done a lot in the community, done a lot in his career. Again, it is a little ironic that it's Charlotte, after such a short amount of time, but those were some really great years. I mean, this has nothing to do with anything, but I just remember NBA jams, playing with Alonzo Mourning and Larry Johnson. Those guys were just amazing, and Zo had some really great years in Charlotte, man. So I think it was a great honor.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think it also kind of gives us forward thinking. Like most people, they look at this and they say, oh my God, it's just desperation because the Charlotte Hornets, have never had a long-term sustaining foundation player. But let's remember, man, this was at a time when we were more enamored with the game that some of these guys played, and we remember them where they played for those teams. So I'm more appreciative of the fact that Charlotte recognized what Alonzo Mourning was able to do those few years. It's just a shame because I think if Charlotte figured out a way to have kept him, that we would have probably seen more of the Charlotte Hornets being an impactful team during those years in the NBA. Finally, but NBA injuries. KCP, Rudy Gay, Kevin Love, Paul Gasol, Tyreek Evans, Darren Williams, Kevin Martin, KG, James Johnson. The list goes on and on and on. This could actually be the all-star NBA injury team right now, Shaw. All of these injuries happening just before all-star break. Which ones are the most impactful? And, what can we say now about the injury bug taking over some of these guys?
Yeah, this is very, very problematic. You hate to be talking about, these injuries and people getting banged up, but the All-Star break is coming along just in time now, I guess, for some of these guys to rest up and heal for those who will not be participating in All-Star weekend. KCP for Detroit is an interesting situation because, we don't really know what happened to him. I think it was a groin that he stretched per se, but that's giving Stanley Johnson an opportunity to really play right now. So the Pistons obviously need KCP to really make that stretch run. Rudy Gay, he's got that ankle injury. He's been in our lineup for the last couple of weeks. Don't really know if he's going to be back, before the break as well. Darren Williams did come back, but same thing, been in our lineup all season long. And another guy, Manu Ginobili, now is also going to be out for the next month with, he had testicular surgery after getting kneed and basically nuts by Ryan Anderson. So lots of weird things going on out there in the NBA. Hope all these guys get back on the right path and the right path to health very, very soon.
All right, out in Memphis, there was speculations or reports about Vince Carter, this being his final season. And then the other night, we saw this vicious dunk by Jeff Green and paying homage to our man Vince Carter with the vroom vroom, and then Vince Carter himself kind of dialing, turning back the clock a little bit with this awesome, how he loves to do the one-handed up underneath layup if he isn't dunking it on somebody. He clearly says, man, he doesn't see himself retiring anytime soon. Half man, half amazing. Are we half amazed at the fact that he's deciding that he's not talking about retirement just yet?
A little bit, I did a piece on him a couple of years ago when he was still in Dallas and was producing at a pretty nice clip there, but even that production has definitely simmered down a lot. And his role in Memphis, he was brought there to potentially give them some spacing and three-point shooting. Doesn't really get that too much court time, but he is a guy who's helping out in the locker room, and he's always going to be a pro's pro. So the fact that he's not ready to retire, I mean, you could say he's kind of going to be like Paul Pierce-like, but Pierce is still getting those minutes. But I do feel like he probably should be looking at, heading it up a little bit. But if he still feels like, hey, I have something to contribute, he's not a problem in the locker room at all. So VC is always welcome.
All right. Now, this is one of the big stuff that's kind of being talked about, especially as we start looking towards All-Star Weekend. Adam Silver has been contemplating about some possible rule changes with regards to the hack-a-Shaq, hack-a-Jordan, bang-a-Drummond rule. Shaw, what do we make about Adam Silver's, particular take that he's looking to approach this situation? And what is this now saying, or how's it resonating throughout the rest of the NBA community?
Well, I mean, there's people all over the place, and you're getting a lot of information from multiple outlets, from media to high school coaches to players. Everybody has their say on the matter. Again, I know where I stand on it. I'm not necessarily in favor of changing the rule, but I understand the process and it's slowing down the game and not being fan friendly. All of that. Now, the fact that Silver sees it that way too makes everyone think that, okay, that something's going to happen. It was on the USA Today, I think the A to Z podcast, is where he announced that he definitely is looking at it. He feels some type of way when he's in the arena and people are looking at him like, hey, are you going to do something about this? So they're going to take a hard look at this. I think we're going to see something definitely change, going into next season.
Yeah. Listen, I'd be very, very interested to see where Adam Silver goes with this. And hopefully, again, this is not something that becomes a detriment to take away from the strategy of the game and then winds up being a crutch for these guys who really should learn how to shoot free throws. And there are a couple of guys, I love watching them play the game. But listen, I cannot stand when they get on the free throw line, but it's something that you have to live with. You're either good at it or you're not. Finally, Shaw, out in Clipperland, and we kind of touched on this before about what's going to happen now, the fallout with regards to Blake Griffin. But it seems now that teams are calling out Blake, man, and it's kind of a disturbing trend, but at the same time, are we really not surprised?
Well, no, not really at this point. His situation in LA has not gone the way anybody would have hoped, and least of all himself. And now, people are calling to kind of figure out, hey, is he available? Is this somebody that we can potentially get? Doc Rivers has come out and vehemently said we're not interested in moving him, but you're hearing all kinds of reports. Kevin Durant and the like, maybe in the summer. The Clippers are going to have to look at their situation in terms of, are they really going to be contenders with this current roster and the way it's built up? And Blake is a big part of that. So you'll see his name come up in trade rumors over the summer, especially if the Clippers don't at least make the Western Conference Finals.
Indeed. Awesome show this week, Shaw, man. Great guests, great analysis and perspective, from our guests this week, man. I'm telling you, man, we are riding in on full tilt going into the All-Star weekend. Guns blazing, boy. We coming out with everything.
Absolutely. It was a great show. And as you mentioned, I think this is an amazing way to close out things before we head into All-Star weekend. And then we're going to have kind of a week without basketball, if you will, after that Sunday game. So hope everybody enjoyed it, man. It was so great to talk to some of these guys out here, Mark Kaplan and our man Sherman from Welcome to Loud City. I just think it was a fascinating conversation. The OKC Thunder are such an amazing team with two of the top five, I'd say, best players in the NBA on the same roster. That always brings intrigue and kind of see what their process is going to be like the rest of the season. And then obviously getting back into the fantasy flow, man. It just, we love our fantasy basketball out here. We know I know you love the DFS standpoint. I love I love the grind of the regular season in the fantasy basketball landscape too. So this was an amazing show. Hope everybody enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. And once again, we'd like to thank our man JA Sherman, editor of Loud City. Once again, be sure to check him out, www.welcometoloudcity.com. And then also our man Mark Kaplan, the true guru himself, always doing lovely work with Fantasy Alarm. For the baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we can't wait to help you guys get ready, get set, get geared up for NBA All-Star Weekend. So keep us locked and keep us tuned. But until then, we'll catch up with you next time.